Did you know that 15% of adults have gallstones and even more have gallbladder sludge? Why this matters is because people are often told if they have gallbladder related symptoms, they should probably have their gallbladder removed. This procedure to remove the gallbladder, known as a cholecystectomy, occurs 700,000 times per year in the United States, which is an astronomically high number. And removing the gallbladder is not a benign procedure. In fact, at the clinic, we often see patients who have had their gallbladders removed. Rather than seeing relief in their gastrointestinal symptoms, they often experience a worsening of their symptoms. What most people don't know is that by improving one's gut health can actually help to restore healthy gallbladder function. A 2023 review paper summarizes this beautifully, and they said, in recent years, the gastrointestinal microbiome has emerged as one of the critical regulators of gallstone formation. There's two cases that Dr. Ruscio wanted me to share with you today that really emphasize this gallbladder microbiome connection. There's two patients, both of them were at risk of having their gallbladders removed, and I want to share with you the protocol that we used to help save their gallbladders. So in this video, let's discuss symptoms of gallbladder dysfunction. So how do you know if you have gallbladder dysfunction? How the microbiome is actually one of the most important regulators of gallbladder health, and also what was the protocol that we used in these individuals to save their gallbladders. I'm Dr. Scott Spiridigliozzi. I am the Director of Clinical Care at the Ruscio Institute, where I see patients and perform clinical research. Let's cover symptoms first. So symptoms of gallbladder dysfunction, one of the more hallmark presentations is this pain in the right upper quadrant region of the abdomen, which is where the gallbladder is located. So after you eat a meal, patients with gallbladder dysfunction can often complain of they have pain right where the gallbladder is, and that pain can actually radiate to their shoulder or their shoulder blade. Other symptoms include fat intolerance, so they just don't feel good digestively if they have a higher fat meal. They can experience floating and light colored stools, which are symptoms of fat malabsorption. And they can also experience gas and bloating, nausea, heartburn, and indigestion. The more symptoms that one has associated with gallbladder dysfunction, the higher the risk of having their gallbladders removed. So let's cover the microbiome and explain and understand how a healthy microbiome leads to a healthy gallbladder. And then on the contrary, how does an unhealthy microbiome lead to an unhealthy gallbladder? So we want to first start with talking about bile. Bile is this fluid that is made by the liver, stored inside of the gallbladder. After you eat a meal, the gallbladder will squeeze and shoot that bile into the small intestine, where it's used to help break down fat so you can absorb it more effectively. And it also helps support healthy motility, which essentially means allowing the food to effectively move through your intestines. So bile is composed of many different compounds. The ones that I want to really emphasize, because they really intimately connect to the microbiome, are called bile acids. So there's two different types of bile acids. There's primary bile acids, and then there's secondary bile acids. To keep it simple, the primary bile acids help to make the bile thin. And then the secondary bile acids, they help to thicken up the bile. So we need both of those in the proper balance. And a healthy microbiome is what allows us to have this proper balance of primary and secondary bile acids. It's when we start to get an imbalance in the microbiome where we then get a thicker bile, and therefore when bile gets thicker, it starts to form stones and sludge. Now, this is where we start to get into trouble and develop symptoms associated with gallbladder dysfunction, because we need the bile to be on the more thin side so it can more easily get out into the small intestine and digest your food. There's two categories of imbalanced microbiome that I want to cover: SIBO, or small intestinal bacterial overgrowth, and dysbiosis. So with SIBO, and there's actually a 2018 observational study where they looked at patients with gallstones versus healthy controls, so no gallstones. And what they found was 40% of the individuals with gallstones had SIBO, whereas only 20% of those that were in the healthy control group had SIBO. So a doubling of the amount of SIBO in those with gallstones versus those without. So what's the mechanism here? Why does SIBO lead to gallstones, or at least associate or correlate with a higher chance of having gallstones? And one of the main mechanisms is if you have an excess of bacteria in the small intestine, it actually leads to a loss of those primary bile acids. So normally our intestines want to reabsorb those primary bile acids after they've been put into the small intestine to be reused and recycled for subsequent meals. When you have excessive amounts of bacteria in the small intestine, those bacteria produce an enzyme that prevents our body from reabsorbing those primary bile acids, those thinning bile acids. So we end up losing them, and now we end up getting a thicker bile. The other aspect of the imbalanced microbiome is, again, dysbiosis, which is this general term for a disrupted microbiome. And there is a 2020 study that looked at those with gallstones versus healthy controls, and they found those with gallstones had higher levels of dysbiosis, and they had higher levels of those pesky secondary bile acids. So again, this leads to a thicker bile. The mechanism here is when you have this dysbiosis, some of these bacteria, they can produce an enzyme known as 7-alpha dehydroxylase. What that enzyme does is it takes those primary thinning bile acids and actually converts them into the secondary or more thickening bile acids. So to summarize, when you have dysbiosis, when you have SIBO, you end up getting a thicker bile, which then predisposes you to having gallstones and sludge, and overall just making your gallbladder have to work that much harder to function. So let's discuss these two cases that we were able to help save their gallbladders at the clinic. So both of these cases, they had clear inciting events that led to a disruption in their microbiome, and they were both told that they would need to have their gallbladders removed. The first case was a 61-year-old male, and he came to the clinic with main symptoms of right upper quadrant pain, and it was radiating to his shoulder, as well as this significant throat pressure after eating, which I suspected to be what's called silent reflux, which is actually associated with gallbladder dysfunction. In his case, the preceding event that led to his symptoms were antibiotics for dental infections. And we know that antibiotics lead to dysbiosis. The imaging that he had was a gallbladder ultrasound, and on the imaging, they were able to see gallstones. Okay, now second case. It was a 30-year-old female, and her primary symptoms were fat intolerance. So she would have a high-fat meal, and her digestion would just feel worse. She had light-colored stools, right upper quadrant pain, burning of the stomach, and bloating. Now, in her case, the trigger for her was a proton pump inhibitor that was used for gastritis. And examples of proton pump inhibitors are things like omeprazole and Prilosec. They're basically used to suppress your stomach acid. And what happens when you suppress stomach acid is that it can actually lead to gallbladder dysfunction and dysbiosis/SIBO. In her case, she did two different studies. She did an ultrasound and what's known as a HIDA scan. The ultrasound surprisingly didn't find any stones or sludge, but in her case, the HIDA scan showed what's known as a reduced ejection fraction. So the HIDA scan measures how well is the gallbladder able to squeeze the bile into the small intestine. In her case, the gallbladder was not able to squeeze very well. It was squeezing very weakly, so the bile was very inefficiently getting into the small intestine, which was leading to gallbladder pain and then symptoms of gallbladder dysfunction. And what's fascinating to know is that while on one hand, secondary bile acids can lead to a thicker bile, which she didn't have in her case, but secondary bile acids can also impair gallbladder motility, which could therefore present as a reduced ejection fraction. So to summarize, both of these cases, they had inciting medications that led to a disruption of their microbiome. They had gallbladder symptoms. They had imaging that supported gallbladder dysfunction. And both of these individuals were recommended to have their gallbladders removed. And the exciting part here is that neither of them needed to get the gallbladders removed. How was that possible? What did we do that allowed them to save their gallbladders and not get this surgery? So it's helpful to think of this treatment plan through a framework. how do we modulate the microbiome, i.e., how do we improve dysbiosis and SIBO? The second part of this framework is how do we support thinning of the bile? So that the microbiome treatments, there's a few components to this that we focus on with them. The first was probiotics. So we know probiotics have excellent data for improving and supporting dysbiosis and SIBO, but what about with gallbladder dysfunction? So there's a 2022 randomized controlled trial that took gallstone patients and they gave them probiotics for 2 weeks. And what they found was the probiotics led to a reduction of secondary bile acids, which again are the bile acids that lead to a thicker bile. And the authors quote, "We believe that probiotics may be an effective therapeutic drug for inhibiting gallstones." So our approach with probiotics is we like to use what are called triple therapy probiotics. And this essentially combines three of the most researched probiotic categories and combines them into one. And those three categories are a blend of Lactobacillus bifidobacterium species, a healthy yeast known as Saccharomyces, whether that's Cerevisiae or Boulardii, and then soil-based probiotics. So the low FODMAP diet is the second component of their treatment plans. And the low FODMAP diet is basically a diet low in fermentable carbohydrates. And those fermentable carbohydrates are one of the primary food sources for bacteria in our intestines. And while the low FODMAP diet is not directly studied for gallbladder dysfunction, mechanistically, it makes sense. If we know that dysbiosis and SIBO lead to more sluggish bile to thicker bile to gallstones, and we know that the low FODMAP diet is clinically useful for reducing dysbiosis and SIBO, we can extrapolate that the low FODMAP diet therefore could be helpful for gallbladder dysfunction. And the caveat here is fiber is often reduced in a low FODMAP diet. And the literature is pretty clear that a higher fiber diet is actually protective of gallstones. However, the way we think about the low FODMAP diet is it's more of a short-term intervention to create a healthier microbiome to help get rid of the dysbiosis, the SIBO, and therefore lead to a healthier bile composition to healthier gallbladder function. And then once those overgrowths are eradicated and resolved, now you can start to have a more broad diet and higher fiber intake. So that's how we're thinking about using the low FODMAP diet in this case. The third component are herbal antimicrobials, which are essentially herbs that help to eradicate SIBO and dysbiosis. So it's a similar mechanism as the low FODMAP diet. The herbals that we used for these individuals were Biota-Clear 1A and 1B for 1 month. And then after that month, we switched over to Biota-Clear 2A and 2B. And then throughout the entire 2-month protocol, we use a anti-biofilm agent known as Biota-Dissolve. And actually, this is the protocol that we use in our 2025 paper that we published on using herbal antimicrobials and anti-biofilm agents for the treatment of SIBO. Okay, so we covered the microbiome modulating components of the plan. Now let's cover the bile thinning treatments. There's 3 different bile thinning treatments that we use for these individuals: glycine, TUDCA, and phosphatidylcholine. So glycine is an amino acid that actually helps to make the bile acids more water soluble. In other words, helps to thin them out so they are not viscous and thick, and therefore leads to a reduced chance of having gallstones and gall sludge. TUDCA is a really interesting one. It's actually a bile acid that when you take it, it can thin out the bile. There's a really cool 2025 study on gallstone patients where they didn't use TUDCA, but they used this sister compound called UDCA, so TUDCA without the T. And UDCA is a prescription, whereas TUDCA is you can get it over the counter. What they found was gallstones dissolved in 60% of patients who received UDCA, which is a pretty remarkable that taking this compound was actually able to dissolve already established stones. And now UDCA and TUDCA, they do have somewhat similar efficacy. There's not, to the best of my knowledge, data on using TUDCA for dissolving gallstones. But if we can extrapolate that UDCA and TUDCA are fairly similar in efficacy, and clinically, we do see that TUDCA improves symptoms of gallbladder dysfunction, I feel pretty confident about using TUDCA in this context. The last agent is called phosphatidylcholine, which, taking a step back, it's important to know that, yes, in bile there are bile acids. There's also a decent amount of cholesterol. And when people have gallstones, more often than not, those gallstones are made up heavily of cholesterol. And what phosphatidylcholine does is it actually helps to keep cholesterol dissolved in the bile. So when cholesterol is out of solution, when it's precipitated, that is what leads to gallstones. So taking phosphatidylcholine ensures that the cholesterol stays in the bile and therefore does not lead to gallstones. So what happened in these two different cases when we put them on this treatment plan? So the 61-year-old male, all of his symptoms resolved within 2 months, which is really exciting. The low FODMAP diet in his case led to near immediate relief of that throat tightness symptom, which to me supports this idea that that was from silent reflux. And then the use of the probiotics, the herbal antimicrobials, and the bile thinning agents slowly over time in those 2 months resolved his right upper quadrant gallbladder pain. For the 30-year-old female, all of her symptoms resolved in about 3 months. For her, the bile thinning supports led to a marked difference in her gallbladder pain in a fairly quick period of time, actually. So she noticed that her gallbladder pain resolved within just a couple of weeks of implementing those bile thinning supports. And then with the use of the probiotics, the herbal antimicrobials, the low FODMAP diet, all of her symptoms just slowly resolved within that 3-month time frame. I am waiting on getting repeat imaging for those 2 different patients. It'd be great to prove and that objectively their gallbladders are now healthier. I suspect that they're healthier given the fact that they aren't having these symptoms, but it would be great to have objective data, which I am looking forward to getting at some point in the future from them. All right, so in closing, we discussed the primary symptoms associated with gallbladder dysfunction, how the microbiome is actually one of the major causes of whether or not you have a healthy or unhealthy gallbladder. And the treatments to reverse gallbladder dysfunction include things that target dysbiosis and SIBO, so probiotics, low FODMAP diet, herbal antimicrobials, and the use of bile thinners, including glycine, TUDCA, and phosphatidylcholine. I'm really happy for these 2 patients that we were able to save their gallbladders, skip out on that surgery, and just overall improve their quality of lives. So if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. This helps us share practical, science-based health information with more people.